It's Mohim for Boxing Domination, and today I'm joined by the legend himself, Dan Hardy, here at the Fury Ngannou. So, how you doing?
I'm really good. Happy to be here.
Obviously, I do want to say, first of all, you are one of my inspirations. I think you're a fantastic human being, in and out the sport. Now, going back to the whole thing, Fury Ngannou, former heavyweight champion in the UFC, the undisputed champion, versus the lineal and the WBC heavyweight champion in Tyson Fury. How do you see that going? I mean, there was a puncher's chance. People are writing Ngannou off, but there was a puncher's chance. Can you break it down for me?
Yeah, I mean, there is always a puncher's chance. And, of course, we've seen Tyson up against the best heavyweights in the world. We've seen him take big punches and get back to his feet. The difference is every single one of those boxers that he's fought, they're trained like a boxer, right? They've got decent boxing fundamentals that makes them more predictable. The difference with Ngannou is that he throws punches from his hip. He throws them with bad intentions. You look at him knocking out, anybody. You pick any of his knockouts, but Rosenstrike or Overeem, he's running through these individuals who have got loads and loads of striking combat sports experience. He's just a different individual, and this is why you can't count him out. And because of the power that he's got, he only needs to land one time, and that changes the outlook of the fight.
It's a massive fight in Saudi. I believe it is predicted to break pay-per-view records, that's for sure. Do you think crossover boxing is great for the sport?
I think it's good for. This is good for MMA and it's good for boxing as well. I appreciate the fact that Tyson Fury's opened the door and taken this risk, because it is a huge risk for Tyson really to step in there with Ngannou when he really doesn't need to. But then on the other side, Ngannou's taking on such an incredible champion that no matter what happens, he's already won by stepping in there with him. He's made his money. He backed himself in free agency and it paid off. It doesn't really matter what happens in the fight for me. The pressure really is on Tyson Fury to make sure that he doesn't get clipped with one of those big shots. Ngannou's already achieved so much just by being here.
And I think if we go back in history, we had Conor McGregor-Mayweather fight. We've had the likes of, I believe he fought in the UFC or Bellator, Fabio Maldonado, who was also in the heavyweight division.
Yep. James Toney as well came over to the UFC. We've had a few crossovers, but it's always easier for MMA fighters to cross over into boxing than it is for boxers to cross over into MMA. I think we've realised that. But I also can't count Tyson Fury out if he does decide to cross over to MMA. Like, of all the boxers, I think he might be a good crossover.
So in recent reports, we saw Rampage Jackson and Shannon Briggs go at it, and they've agreed verbally, not papers yet, on one fight in boxing, one fight in MMA. Mm-hmm. That's another fight that's very interesting. They're both quite old, but they're both still unbelievable athletes. How do you see that, a fight like that going, if it does happen?
Well, we know we know what Rampage is all about. He's a big puncher. He wants to pick people up and slam them. Shannon Briggs has got the boxing experience. I expect him to want to work a long range, but if Rampage gets a hold of you and starts throwing you around, he's an absolute nightmare. And I wouldn't even underestimate him, no matter what age he is. He's in this day and age of combat sports, as long as people are interested in the individual, they're interested in the fight, right? And sometimes combat sports athletes aren't good enough at making them interesting as individuals, which is why we're having a lot of these influencer boxing fights, right? We're having people that aren't necessarily the best two fighters in the world, but they're commanding more money and more respect and more pay-per-view buys because people are more invested in their careers. And I think with these two guys, you've got a lot of investment because they're big characters, and I think they're going to carry that into the fight.
And since your Cage Warrior days to the UFC, how's life treating you since retirement?
You know what? It's been a whirlwind, my friend. I don't even know where to start. It feels like we were just chatting about Cage Warriors a moment ago, and it seems like a lifetime ago. It's hard to think that was me in this life. So much has happened. It's been incredible. I feel very privileged to just kind of chase the dream as a kid, and to be here talking to you about the best fighters in the world. Cage Warriors was great. Joining the UFC was fantastic. Commentating for the UFC was fantastic. Now I'm in a stage in my career where I'm trying to influence the industry in a positive way. I'm fighter ops for PFL Europe. I can sign fighters now and match them, and just try and have a positive influence in the sport. That's really my goal now. I've benefited so much from it. It's time for me to give something back.
Of course, Ngannou, I'm talking back on the Ngannou right now. Francis Ngannou, of course, is now part of PFL. Jake Paul's also part of PFL. Jake Paul started a campaign against the UFC, including Mark Hunt being a part of it, saying fighters' paychecks are horrendous. In Mark Hunt's words, in one of the recent interviews after the Sonny Bill Williams fight, he also spoken about how the UFC pays a lot less, significantly less than how much he got paid against the likes of Paul Gallen and even Sonny Bill Williams, which was a super fight in Australia. I want to ask you, I mean, do you think the paycheck is still a problem, like, you know, in terms of in the whole MMA community?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. I mean, you know, we know how much money the UFC are making. We know how much clear profit they're making, how much they're making off sponsorships, and how almost none of that is getting to the fighters. I mean, you know, you look across professional sports, most sports are somewhere between, you know, 30 and 50% of the revenue for the fighter, for the athletes. What's the UFC? It's around sort of 15%, maybe a bit less. Like, ultimately, you know, you invest more in the athletes by paying them more. They invest more in themselves in their training camps, and they invest more in their future by opening more gyms. I just feel like the money needs to get there eventually. But then moves like this by Francis Ngannou, that's what's going to change the game. And that's what's going to, you know, I mean, anybody fighting Francis Ngannou in MMA now is going to be fighting for the PFL, and they'll get $2 million. Like, if you're a heavyweight fighter on the UFC roster, I would be considering that.
And I'm going to keep it short. John Jones as well is another fighter. I would love to see him fight someone like Anthony Joshua. The current Anthony Joshua versus John Jones in boxing, I think that's a mysterious one. How do you see that fight going, and what's your dream fight to watch or be in?
You know, I mean, John Jones is one of my favourites of all time, just because, I mean, what he's been capable of achieving in mixed martial arts, and really what there is left for him to achieve. I feel like we've still not seen the limitations of his capability. I feel like John Jones crossing over into boxing would be really interesting as well. You know, height and reach. He's very slick. He's very technical. You know, imagine we've got Tyson Fury and Francis Ngannou, and then we've got John Jones, Deontay Wilder. That would be a really interesting fight. You know, and there's no reason why we can't see more crossovers as well. I would love to see Ngannou and John Jones. Ultimately, that's the fight I want to see. I would love to see it in mixed martial arts. That would require the UFC doing a collaboration with the PFL though, and I just don't think they will do that, which is a shame, because it's going to keep their fighters locked into, you know, into a more rigid structure.
And I'm going to keep it onto myself now, because I started jiu-jitsu just over 3 months ago.
Nice.
From moving over to boxing. What advice would you give me, or just in life in general, what advice can you give me? It's just a personal thing for me.
Just a personal thing. You've got to enjoy the process. You know, this is. I always say this to people that are just getting into martial arts. I enjoyed martial arts until I started fighting professionally. Then it was all about being ready for the fight, and I would get to the gym every day and not really fully enjoy the process of getting ready. You know, like you're in the beginning stages of your jiu-jitsu career. This is where you're learning very quickly, and all of a sudden you're finding things that you can use straight away, and that does slow down after a while. You know, you do find that your progress starts to slow down a little bit, but don't lose that enjoyment of being on the mats every day and just picking up little bits that you can bring back the next session.
Sometimes when I'm at Fight Zone gym, I do feel like I'm Dan Hardy. I'll genuinely be honest. Like, sometimes I feel like
You're
I'm
probably much better than me, though, my friend.
No, but as soon as I start sparring, I'm done.
Spike the hair up and get the lead hook working.
Are we going to see you back in maybe for like a charity fight or like an influencer fight one day?
I'm always open to my options.
Would you fight a fan? Would you fight a fan, by the way? I'm sorry to cut you off. Would you fight
a fan?
Like myself? In jiu-jitsu?
I don't know. Well, yeah, I'd have a roll with you in jiu-jitsu for sure. Yeah, for me, a fight, I would have to feel motivated to hit the person. You know what I mean? But I'm not counting it out. Absolutely. If the right offer comes through to me, I'll certainly accept it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Good talking to you.
The light just went off.